Hey, what's going on YouTube? I'm going to be reacting to how did America become a superpower after World War II. It's funny because I was never interested in history when I was in school, but for some reason, like after I got out of school, I just started getting interested in history, like the U.S. history, like just history in general. So today I'm going to be reacting to this video. Hopefully you guys like it. And if you guys want to suggest any videos for me to react, please do so in the comments. Alright, let's just get into it.
It's morning in America. All over the newly built suburbs, men months earlier were fighting in Europe or Asia, climbing into their cars and heading to work. In the cities, returning veterans crowd lecture halls at universities and colleges, receiving advanced educations they never thought possible, and all on Uncle Sam's dime.
Yo, what the heck is this video?
Manufacturing booms under a tsunami of private investment. The lean times of the Great Depression fading from memory as stores are flooded with a bevy of American-made appliances, gadgets, and goods. And abroad, American servicemen keep watch over lands from Cuba to Korea. A new world has come into being, an American one.
Hi, I'm Griffin Johnson, the Armchair Historian. In today's video, we will examine how the United States went from an isolationist democracy uninterested in world affairs to one of the two superpowers spreading their influence around the world. First, we'll look at the effects that in the post-war world. And lastly, we'll take a look at the political maneuvering, economic luck, and the cloak and dagger exercises it took to get there. So now, let's look at where America was before entering the Second World War. The stock market crash of 1929 and the resulting Great Depression were especially hard on the United States. In a desperate attempt to revitalize the economy, President Herbert Hoover signed the 1930 Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, which raised customs duties to such an extent that imported goods became unaffordable to all but the wealthiest Americans. Instead of spurring...
So I'm guessing he did that so Americans can spend money on, you know, like products from the U.S., which made the U.S. richer, you know? That's what I'm guessing.
Domestic purchasing and production as intended, the Smoot-Hawley tariffs succeeded only in further damaging the world's economy. As other nations passed retaliatory tariffs against American exports, international trade plummeted by 65%, leading to the full collapse of banks in America and Europe, as the world economy only increased its tailspin. When Franklin Delano Roosevelt became president in 1933, he immediately set about implementing his New Deal program to strengthen America's economy and get people back to work.
Okay.
He insured Americans' bank accounts through the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, or FDIC, implemented the Social Security program to provide income to the disabled and elderly, and brought thousands onto the federal payroll through public works projects. While these programs certainly benefited countless Americans, the effects of Roosevelt's New Deal paled in comparison to those of America joining the Second World War. With the sleeping giant awakened, the United States saw a tectonic shift in economic activity, between the draft and the industrial sector experiencing a massive demand for new laborers to produce war materiel. Unemployment plummeted overnight. America's women also stepped into the breach, taking jobs traditionally reserved for men. Government contract.
So I have seen this, the We Can Do It logo. I mean, I never really paid attention to what it really meant, but I think this is what it means, where, you know, men were going to war, and so the women had to step up, you know, and help with the production of stuff. Was it World War II or World War I where the U.S. sold weapons to, I think it was Europe. I'm not sure if it was one or two.
And investment spurred continued growth, and America's economy roared back to life through victory in 1945.
So they were getting
Arguably,
rich.
the dropping of the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki marked a new chapter in American history. The isolationist America of old perished in the nuclear holocaust that ended the Second World War. The United States was the only allied country to emerge from the war with her economy not only intact, but thriving. As government contracts ended and subsidies were withdrawn, private investment took their place. Consumers were able to purchase goods and appliances that had long been outside of their economic reach, and they used their new economic power to spur more and more spending and growth. This transition from a war economy to a consumerist one was the bedrock of America's post-war preeminence. But none of it would be possible without the influx of working-age men coming home from the war, ready to start their new lives in this revitalized country. Returning GIs...
That's crazy. Like, they left a country to a war to come back to a completely different country, you know, like it was struggling at first, but it's just crazy to think that usually if a country is in war, you know, or in a period of war, you would guess that the country is hurting because they're spending money, they're losing men, but somehow the US was able to work around it and get rich off of it, which may seem bad for some people, but it also, you know, it has its, you know, pros and cons, I guess.
Stepped off their boats, planes, and trains to find an America totally different from the one they had left. Many would remember the mistreatment their fathers and grandfathers had endured after the First World War, when they were given a pittance of a bonus and a train fare home. But things would be different this time. The GI Bill of Rights was signed into law by President Roosevelt in 1944 and promised myriad benefits to returning veterans, from federal guarantees on home loans to subsidized university or vocational education. Between 1944 and 1956, 7.8 million veterans went to college or trade schools with GI Bill subsidies, while 2.4 million home loans were guaranteed by the Veterans Administration.
Oh, wow.
These loans were used to buy houses in the newly built suburbs, where a plethora of new single-family homes drew people from the cities to these new developments. This was the start of American car culture, and the suburban population began commuting from their new homes to their new jobs in the cities on the new interstate highway system. Life was good in the new America, but there were many.
So is that the first time that we had highways, or were there highways before? That's weird. Because I've always thought, you know, like while I'm driving in the highway, I always think like, you know, like how long did it take for people to actually build highways and when? It looks like it was, what was it, 1945 to 1950 something?
Excluded from this newfound prosperity. Black veterans faced a brand new war on the home front. Their first battle was obtaining GI benefits. One of the key compromises that ensured the original law's passing was the condition that aid be administered by state governments rather than a federal agency. This meant that segregationist Jim Crow laws overshadowed the promises of the GI Bill, and aid was often contingent on skin color. Separate but unequal schools set what few black veterans were able to use their benefits up for failure.
That sucks, man. Like the fact that, you know, African American helped fight the war for the US and they still have to get treated like this. That's messed up.
While the majority were simply intimidated into never collecting what they were due. Black unemployment was also endemic throughout the 1950s and 1960s, with what work that was available paying only the smallest of wages and offering no chance for upward mobility. America's women found themselves in a battle of their own. Hired in droves to fill the factories and provide support for the armed services, in the minds of many, the end of the war meant the end of Rosie the Riveter. They were laid off en masse from their wartime jobs to make way for returning servicemen, and those who were kept on the payroll were placed in part-time clerical jobs with no union protections. Women in uniform were denied GI Bill benefits outright, and magazines began running ads and opinion pieces designed to pressure America's women to leave the workforce and settle down as homemakers. This was the dawn of the nuclear family and the beginning of the baby boom, and America asked its women to do a different kind of duty. With its domestic house in order, the United States began to make changes.
That's crazy, you know? Like, the women also helped, and they showed that they were capable of working, you know, jobs that were meant for men. To just, you know, like, oh, thank you, bye. You know, it kind of sucks. And also, just off point, bro, look at how beautiful this video looks. I like the graphics.
Abroad as well. In July of 1944, the United States invited representatives of the Allied nations to Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, where the U.S. Treasury Department proposed an international bank and trade control network to promote worldwide cooperation and prevent the economic brinkmanship that led the world to war. And with that, the International Monetary Fund was born. But this was only a preamble to a much greater effort at American international influence. President Roosevelt believed the world needed a strong international body to prevent future conflict, and such a body would need strong leadership. In his view, American leadership. Roosevelt gathered representatives of the United States, United Kingdom, Soviet Union, and Republic of China at Dumbarton Oaks, a historic residence outside of Washington, D.C., and from August to October of 1944, they laid the groundwork for the United Nations. 1 year later, on October 24th, 1945,
It's crazy. Like, I know the words and the names because I've heard them, obviously, in school. I had tests for them. But, I don't know, it just hits different now.
UN was officially established in San Francisco. Honoring the wishes of his predecessor, President Harry S. Truman personally signed the U.S. Charter for the United States and pressured Congress to ratify it. But America had more than economic and political means to promote her interests. The US never truly demobilized, and she was unafraid to use her military might or shadowy intelligence service to spread her influence. The only roadblock to that influence, in America's view, was communism. The Soviets had already reorganized much of Eastern Europe after the war, and were busy converting these new socialist republics into buffers between them and the rest of the world. Through investment in the Marshall Plan and propaganda coups like the Berlin Airlift, America sought to combat Soviet influence on the PR front, while simultaneously putting her thumb on the scales of elections in the newly created post-war states and elsewhere. On the Asian front, America was busy rebuilding the shattered empire of Japan into a bulwark against the Red Spread in East Asia. On September 8, 1951, the Empire of Japan and the United States signed the Treaty of San Francisco, which officially ended the state of war between Japan and the US.
Grammarly can help you write quickly and confidently, so you never have to slow down at work. Stay on top of emails.
Yo, that's crazy that, you know, like at some point Japan and the US were enemies, to the point where we literally dropped bombs in Japan. And to think that we would be such great allies today, you know? Like, I feel like the US is at awe with Japan, you know, because I don't know, I feel like a lot of Americans love, you know, Japanese culture, you know, a lot of us watch anime. I don't know, I just feel like we like Japan, and in turn I feel like Japan is also they're also a fan of us, you know. We also have like Like, I'm thinking about, like, movies and stuff, like the MCU. But I feel like we're great allies today. And I feel like if someone didn't know about history and we told them, like, back in the day we were enemies and we dropped bombs on them, that would be crazy. But I'm glad we're okay now.
One of the core tenets of the treaty was Japan's total disarmament, with Japan ceding land and resources for the establishment of American garrisons, some of which still stand today. Japan submitted to the US military government, and the Americans were quick to punish the former empire for its pre-war militarism. Demobilized officers of the Imperial Army were barred from certain occupations, such as government service, while the wealthy landowners who supported the war had their property seized by the Americans and redistributed to tenant farmers. But America had more discreet ways of getting what she wanted. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, the CIA undertook a bevy of covert operations throughout the world in support of American foreign policy. The CIA fomented, supported, or outright incited numerous coups and regime changes throughout the post-war years. American support for the vehemently anti-communist regimes of South Korea and South Vietnam is well known, but CIA-backed revolutions also occurred in Iran in 1953 and Guatemala in 1954, among many others worldwide. The 1953 Iranian coup saw the CIA install Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. The CIA accomplished this by bribing, among others, Iranian clergy who spoke out against the previous government. These same clergy who would go on to speak out against the Shah Pahlavi and incite the Iranian Revolution of the 1970s. The 1954 Guatemala coup saw both the CIA and the U.S. ambassador to Guatemala, John Purifoy, support and direct a military overthrow of Guatemala's democratically elected government in favor of a hardline anti-communist dictatorship under President Castillo Armas. While the CIA would come to judge the Armas regime as
dictatorship and communism, I feel like that's the same thing, isn't it? Yo, what is the difference between communist? Sorry, I have to look that up because I really thought they were the same thing. And I was thinking, like, what if, because the U.S., they were so anti-communism, but what if there was someone who was good communism? But I was thinking, like, I don't know, I'm confused. Communism versus dictator. How do you spell dictator? Dictatorship? Oh no, sorry. Difference between communism and dictatorship. Let's see. Communism and dictatorship are very different in all aspects, political as well as economic ideologies. In communism, the society or the community is on top. In communism, the society or the community is on top of everything. But in dictatorship, society or community is only secondary, and it is the dictator who governs everything. Okay. So the dictator, like the person, the dictator is the most important on top of the society. Communism believes the community or the society is more important than everything else. I see. So we help the dictator? Wow. It's crazy.
Inept, despite holding near absolute power, the heads of the agency quietly congratulated each other on a job well done. This was reflective of the CIA's modus operandi, the suppression of democracy to ensure the suppression of communism. Between the areas occupied by her military and her existing possessions, America emerged from the Second World War a territorial giant. The US established an empire spanning from Alaska to Hawaii, from Berlin to Tokyo. With her economic growth, sudden territorial breadth, and willingness to use any means to ensure her position, America had cemented itself as the new superpower on the proverbial block. The eagle had landed. America was forever changed by the Second World War. Spared the chaos and destruction of fighting on her own soil, America was able to take her war economy into the post-war world, becoming a manufacturing juggernaut and calling the tune of international trade. The GI Bill created an educated middle class, but its unequal implementation left both black and female veterans to fend for themselves in the resurgent United States. And with clandestine efforts all around the globe, America was able to effect regime change wherever it deemed necessary, overturning elections and installing sympathetic governments to further her foreign policy goals. America had become an empire to dwarf any throughout history.
Yo, that's crazy. I feel like there's a lot of first of all, I wonder if any other country were to do the same thing as the US, you know, like building manufacturers and you know, basically the same thing the US did. I wonder if they would be also, if they were, I don't know how to say it, but if another country did the same thing the US did, I wonder if they would also become superpowers. Where like the US, the only people that were thinking smart in a way. Also, it does have its own cons, you know, like I said, the females that were helping with the war and the African Americans who helped the war, it was like a slap in the face, you know. And I can see why a lot of countries would hate on the US, just the way it acts. But at the same time, I mean, communism was just crazy, and I wonder if the US saw the communism as a threat. Well, obviously it did see it as a threat, but to think that communism was such a great threat to the US that they had to do and decide things by any means, you know, like helping a dictator just so they can stop the communism. Like they went to such great lengths to stop communism. Also, I wonder how the world would be if that didn't happen. You know, like what if communism and everything was spread around the world instead of the US? What kind of life we would be living today? You know, it's just crazy things to think about. But I enjoyed this video. If you guys want me to react to any other videos, please drop them in the comments. Sorry, I just burped. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.